Pieces are all we get of the picture, only fragments. Come on, give me some examples.
Well, let's take the population problem, for example. You can't solve it by looking at different forms of birth control in isolation. Research has proven again and again that the most effective form of birth control is not a pill. It's economic and social gains, which will reduce the desire for large families.
That's true.
Do you know that in our world, every day 40,000 children die from malnutrition and preventable diseases? That's every other second. It's now, now, and now. But the short lives of these children cannot be seen in isolation. They're part of a whole system involving the economics, involving the environment, and more specifically, involving high levels of third world debt.
How's that?
The burden of frenzied borrowing is not falling on those with foreign bank accounts, nor on those who created the imbalance. The burden is falling on the already deprived. 3 years ago, President Nyerere asked the question, must we starve our children to pay our debts? That question has been answered in practice. And the answer has been yes, because since he asked, hundreds and thousands of little children in the third world have given their lives to pay their country's debts. And millions more are still paying interest with their malnourished minds and bodies. Oh. Take Brazil. Do you know that they are destroying the Amazon rainforest at the rate of 1 football field a second? Now. Why? They're trying to pay their national debts with cattle and land speculation. They don't even have time to sell the timber, so they're setting fire to the woods. And our barren forests are one of the main causes of the global warming, the greenhouse effect. And in the meantime, we are pouring our money into the arms race. See, you cannot look at one single of our global problems in isolation, trying to understand it and solve it. Of course, you can fix a fragment of a piece, but it will deteriorate a second later because what it was connected to has been ignored. We have to change everything together at the same time. The ideals, the institutions, the values.
All of this sounds kind of familiar. Do you two know each other? Is this a setup? Well, all right. What do I think of this? Yes, the problems are complex, but you're just looking at the dark side because so's our capacity to respond, isn't it? Communications, data banks, technology. We already have the tools to deal with a lot of these problems, even if they are more complex.
Candide himself, the eternal optimist.
But don't you see that all these new technologies, they're causing more problems than they solve? In medicine, for example, there's been an overwhelming increase in technology, but the costs have spiraled concurrently. It's become medicine for the rich. And public health hasn't improved significantly, although public health would improve dramatically if we just changed our eating habits, for example. But instead, the experts are occupied with making artificial hearts. But if our agribusiness had fed us better instead of chopping down the rainforests in order to make cattle ranches, in order to produce more and more red meat, which is one of the direct causes of heart attacks, then maybe we wouldn't have to spend so much of our money on artificial hearts, and so on and so on. Well, this is all examples of interconnectedness.
But Sonia... All right, supposing that you're right and everything is connected to everything else, as you say. Still, you've got to start somewhere, don't you? So that's the real political question here. Where do you start?
By changing the way we're seeing the world. You see, you're still searching for the right piece to fix first. You don't see that all the problems simply are fragments of one single crisis, a crisis of perception.
Oh, good. The world is coming to an end, and you say it's a crisis of perception. I'm sorry, that's a little abstract for me. And all of this stuff about modern medicine, all your criticisms. I mean, I may be a doctor's son, but you have to admit that this mechanistic medicine has been pretty successful.
Well, up to a point. But simply by blocking the mechanisms of a disease doesn't mean healing it. I mean, it's like in politics. It's just shifting the problem to another sphere.
Are you going to help me in this, or are you going to leave me stranded out here in this argument by myself?
I'm going to leave you stranded. I'm going to leave you stranded.
Okay. A person goes to a doctor today with recurring attacks of gallstones, and the doctor takes the gallbladder out, and lo and behold, the pain goes away. Now, you could say that the doctor is working from a poor perceptual model, that he just concentrated on a part of the clock that wasn't working and removed it. But the fact is, the patient is out of his pain, he's feeling better, and the clock is ticking again. His perceptual model worked.
But is everything that works good for the system?
Oh, come on, Sonia, that's disingenuous and not at all useful when applied to politics, which is, after all, a system that is based on people. It's the art of bringing people to agree on a certain course of action. If that course of action succeeds, the people are satisfied. If not, they're not. It's as simple as that. If it works, it's good, period.
But isn't that exactly what you said, why politics doesn't work anymore? That politics, you said, needed to become the art of the impossible?
Whose side are you on?
Hers, obviously. She's intelligent, gracious, and she's more attractive.
Listen, Jack, I'd like to get back to the systems. You know, you called me dishonest.
No.
Yeah? Let's talk about the gallbladder again. Let's say the gallbladder is out and the pain is gone. But what about the stress that might have brought the illness on? If that stress persists, he's probably going to get sick again. Or let's say he had changed his nutrition much earlier and done some exercise. He may never have developed the gallstones in the first place. See, a little health education might have been much cheaper than the operation. A lot less painful, too. But our system doesn't encourage prevention. It encourages intervention.
Okay, you're not disingenuous, but to blame all this on a French philosopher who's been dead for 300 years, isn't that a little out of proportion? Maybe even a little eccentric?
No. Not if I'm right. See, my point isn't to condemn Descartes' thinking. It's simply to recognize its limitations. Might have been extremely useful to perceive the world as a machine for 300 years, but that perception today is not only inaccurate, it's actually harmful. We need a new vision of the world.
What's that quotation? It's foolish for a society to try to cling to its old ideas in new times, just as it's foolish for a grown man to try to squeeze into the coat that fit him in his youth. Something like that. Thomas Jefferson. Maybe you're not crazy.
I don't know, Sonia. This new vision of the world might just be some sort of millennium madness, some kind of St. Vitus's dance of the mind as we approach the year 2000.
No, everybody's aware now. We can make ourselves extinct at the press of a button. And we're soiling every square foot of land, sea, and air. That water looks clean, but it's not, is it? Not really. Nothing is. The English Channel is one of the most polluted bodies of water in the world. And the oysters around here are famous, aren't they? Soon they won't be safe to eat.
Not only that, this water is radioactive, contaminated by a nuclear plant a few miles from here.
Yeah, I read about that too. Politicians can read. They know all about these things, and some of us think about them every day. I know I do. But we have to deal with a different set of constraints, different kinds of interdependence than the ones you're talking about. If, let's say it turns out to be true, that what you said is true. Cattle are brutally treated, loaded up with chemicals, too much red meat is bad for you, and the landscape's being wrecked by overgrazing. Let's say all that turns out to be true. So for good health and 100 other reasons, I help enact a tax on the consumption of red meat. The way we tax tobacco to make people think twice about that kind of consumption.
What a wonderful idea. We could do cancer and heart research for the revenue.
Yes, and I'd have 50 lobbyists pounding on my door while 100 different meat producers, political action committees poured money into my opponent's campaign, and my switchboard was lit up all day long with calls from senators and representatives and governors of all the meat-producing states. But okay, Sonia, just for you, let's say that I take all that on. As Sam Rayburn said, every once in a while, a man ought to do something just because it's right. But if, on top of that, I come out against a few weapons